Part 1: The Machine Inside Your Head. Your mind was designed to solve problems. But somewhere along the way, it became a machine that creates them. A message goes unanswered, and your mind begins writing explanations. Maybe they are angry. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe the relationship is ending. Maybe you were never important to them at all. Nothing has actually happened. Yet within minutes, your body is reacting as if disaster has already arrived. Your heart beats faster. Your attention disappears. Your breathing becomes shallow. And one unanswered message turns into an entire imaginary future. This is overthinking. It does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like lying awake at 2 in the morning, replaying a conversation from 3 years ago. Sometimes it looks like preparing for every possible failure, until you become too exhausted to begin. Sometimes it looks like asking for advice, then questioning every answer you receive. Sometimes it looks like intelligence, carefulness, responsibility, preparation. But beneath all of that, there is often fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of losing control. Fear of disappointing someone. Fear of making a decision that cannot be undone. So the mind keeps thinking, because it believes that one more thought, one more scenario, one more hour of analysis will finally create certainty. But certainty never comes. The questions only multiply. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I choose the wrong path? What if I regret this? What if everyone else moves forward, while I remain exactly where I am? The modern world gives these thoughts endless material. Every day, you see other people achieving more, earning more, traveling more, looking happier, living lives that appear more complete than your own. You see the results, but not the confusion that came before them. You see the victory, but not the years of doubt. You see the perfect photograph, but not the fear behind the camera. And slowly, comparison becomes another form of overthinking. Am I behind? Have I wasted too much time? Should I be doing more? What if it is already too late? For someone who is 17, it may be the fear of choosing the wrong future. For someone who is 25, it may be the fear that adulthood is not becoming what they expected. For someone who is 35, it may be the fear that opportunities are disappearing. For someone who is 40, it may be the question they were too busy to ask earlier. Is this really the life I wanted? The details change, but the mental pattern remains the same. The mind leaves the present, travels into an imagined future, creates a threat, and then demands that you solve it immediately. But how can you solve something that has not happened? This is the prison of overthinking. The walls are invisible. The door is open. But the mind convinces you that you cannot leave until every question has been answered. So you wait. You delay. You analyze. You prepare. You reconsider. And life continues moving without you. Not because you lacked ability. Not because you lacked ambition. But because you wanted to feel completely ready before taking the first step. Yet human beings are almost never completely ready. The most important decisions in life are made without perfect information. No one knows with certainty whether a relationship will last, whether a career will succeed, whether a risk will be rewarded, whether a difficult choice will become a mistake. We act with incomplete knowledge. We learn through consequences. We adjust. We continue. But overthinking demands a guarantee that life cannot provide. And when reality refuses to give that guarantee, the mind creates more thoughts. This is why overthinking feels productive, while producing almost nothing. It gives you the sensation of movement, without the risk of action. You can spend 3 hours imagining a difficult conversation, without ever having it. You can spend 6 months planning a project, without ever beginning it. You can spend years waiting for confidence, without realizing that confidence usually arrives after action, not before it. The mind says, think until you feel safe. Life says, act. And learn that you can survive uncertainty. This does not mean thinking is the enemy. Thinking is one of the greatest abilities human beings possess. It builds civilizations, creates medicine, writes philosophy, solves problems, changes lives. But a tool becomes dangerous when it no longer obeys the person using it. Fire can warm a home, or destroy it. A knife can prepare food, or cause harm. Thought can guide your life, or consume it. The problem is not that you think. The problem begins when you can no longer decide when to stop. When the same question returns every hour. When every possibility feels like a warning. When imagination becomes indistinguishable from reality. When your own mind begins speaking with the authority of truth. But thoughts are not facts. Fear is not prophecy. Possibility is not certainty. And the worst outcome you can imagine is not automatically the outcome waiting for you. Most people understand this intellectually. Yet in the middle of anxiety, the imagined threat feels completely real. That is because the body often reacts to what the mind pictures, not only to what the world presents. Imagine biting into a fresh lemon. Picture the sharp taste, the juice touching your tongue. You may notice your mouth responding, even though no lemon is present. Now imagine something far more emotionally powerful. Losing your job. Being rejected. Failing publicly. Watching someone you love leave. The event may not be happening, but the body can still experience tension, fear, and pain. Overthinking turns imagination into emotional reality. You suffer the event before it occurs. Then you suffer while waiting to see whether it will occur. And if it finally does occur, you suffer it again. 3 experiences of pain. For one event that may never happen. More than 2,000 years ago, the Stoic philosopher Seneca observed this human tendency with remarkable clarity. His insight can be summarized simply. We often suffer more in imagination than in reality. The world has changed since Seneca lived. But the human mind has not changed nearly as much. We now have faster technology, more information, more choices, more ways to compare ourselves. But the same ancient fear still lives beneath the surface. What if I cannot handle what comes next? That is the real question behind overthinking. Not what will happen, but will I be strong enough when it happens? And this is where Stoicism offers a different path. It does not promise a life without uncertainty. It does not promise that nothing painful will happen. It does not ask you to pretend everything will be fine. Instead, it teaches something far more useful. You do not need to control every outcome. You need to strengthen the person who will face the outcome. Because when you trust your ability to respond, you no longer need the future to reveal itself in advance. And perhaps freedom from overthinking does not begin When every problem disappears. Perhaps it begins when you finally realize that your mind does not need another answer. It needs a better master. Part 2: Why your mind creates threats. But before you can become the master of your mind, you need to understand why it behaves this way. Because the truth is, your brain is not broken. It is ancient. For most of human history, survival depended on noticing danger before it arrived. A sound in the bushes could be nothing. Or it could be a predator. The person who ignored it might not survive. But the person who expected danger, even when danger was not there, had a greater chance of staying alive. Generation after generation, the human brain became a prediction machine. Its first responsibility was never happiness. It was survival. That system worked remarkably well in a world of wild animals, hunger, violence and physical danger. But the world changed much faster than the brain did. Today, most people are not running from predators. They are running from imagined failure. From rejection. From embarrassment. From financial uncertainty. From disappointing their families. From falling behind everyone else. The threat is different. But the body's response is often the same. An unanswered email can tighten your chest. A critical comment can stay in your mind all day. A delayed reply can become evidence that someone no longer cares. A small mistake at work can turn into a vision of losing your career. Nothing dangerous may be happening in the present moment. But your brain does not wait for certainty. It prepares for the worst possibility. Because preparing for danger once kept human beings alive. This is why overthinking can feel so convincing. It does not arrive as imagination. It arrives as protection. Your mind says, think about every outcome. Prepare for every failure. Predict every reaction. Then nothing will surprise you. But the promise is false. Thinking about every possible disaster does not give you control. It gives every disaster a place inside your mind. And modern life constantly feeds that system. Every notification suggests that something requires your attention. Every headline suggests that another threat has appeared. Every social media feed offers another person to compare yourself with. Someone is wealthier. Someone is more successful. Someone appears happier. Someone reached the goal before you did. The brain sees these images and begins asking whether your position is secure. Am I doing enough? Am I falling behind? Have I chosen the wrong life? What if everyone succeeds except me? The body may be sitting safely inside a quiet room. But the mind is fighting an invisible war. This is one reason silence can feel uncomfortable. When external noise disappears, internal noise becomes louder. So people reach for another video. Another message. Another distraction. Not always because they enjoy it. But because stimulation prevents them from hearing the thoughts waiting underneath. Yet every escape teaches the mind the same lesson. This feeling is dangerous. You must avoid it. And what you repeatedly avoid often becomes more frightening. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. They recognized that human suffering often begins when the mind confuses an impression with reality. Something happens. Then the mind immediately adds meaning. A person does not reply. That is the event. They are rejecting me. That is the interpretation. A plan fails. That is the event. My future is ruined. That is the interpretation. Someone criticizes you. Those are words. I am not good enough. That is the judgment. The event may be difficult. But the mind often multiplies the difficulty by adding predictions, identities, and imagined consequences. Epictetus taught that people are disturbed not merely by events, but by the judgments they form about those events. This does not mean pain is imaginary. It does not mean every problem can be solved by thinking positively. Loss is real. Failure is real. Uncertainty is real. But the first event and the story built around it are not always the same thing. And freedom begins when you learn to separate them. Ask: what has actually happened? What am I adding to it? What evidence do I truly have? What part of this is under my control? These questions interrupt the ancient alarm system. They return the mind from prediction to observation, from imagination to reality, from helplessness to action. Your brain may continue offering frightening possibilities. That is what prediction machines do. But you do not have to treat every prediction as an instruction. You do not have to chase every thought. You do not have to answer every fear. A thought can appear without becoming your master. And this is where the ancient Stoics made their most important discovery. The mind may produce the first impression automatically. But what happens next can be trained. Part 3. The Stoics discovered what modern science confirmed. Your brain may continue creating thoughts. That is normal. The real question is, must you obey every one of them? More than 2,000 years ago. Long before psychology laboratories. Before brain scans. Before neuroscience. 3 philosophers reached a conclusion that still challenges the modern mind. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca. They all discovered the same truth. Human suffering is often multiplied. Not by reality, but by the stories we tell ourselves about reality. Imagine standing in the rain. You cannot stop the rain. You cannot negotiate with the clouds. You cannot demand sunshine. The only thing that truly belongs to you is how you choose to respond. Marcus Aurelius wrote something astonishing. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Read that sentence again. He never promised that life would become easier. He never promised that pain would disappear. He promised something much more valuable. That your inner world does not have to become a prisoner of the outer world. Most people spend their lives trying to control everything around them. Their career, their relationships, other people's opinions, the future, luck, the economy, even time itself. And because none of those things can ever be completely controlled, they live in permanent anxiety. The Stoics chose a different path. Instead of asking, how can I control the world? They asked, what actually belongs to me? The answer surprised them. Not wealth. Not reputation. Not success. Not even the body itself. Only one thing. Your judgment. Your choices. Your response. Epictetus explained it with extraordinary clarity. It is not things themselves that disturb us, but the opinions we form about them. Think about that carefully. 2 people lose the same job. One believes, my life is over. The other believes, this is painful, but it may become the beginning of something better. The event is identical. The experience is completely different. Because between the event and the emotion, there is something invisible. Interpretation. And interpretation can be trained. This is where overthinking begins to lose its power. Because every frightening thought must now pass through one question. Is this reality? Or merely my interpretation of reality? Notice what happens. The mind says, everyone will judge me. Reality asks, do I know that for certain? The mind says, if I fail once, everything is ruined. Reality asks, where is the evidence? The mind says, I cannot handle this. Reality quietly replies, you have survived every difficult day that brought you here. This is not positive thinking. It is disciplined thinking. The Stoics never asked people to deny reality. They asked them to see reality before imagination covered it with fear. Seneca once observed that we suffer far more often in imagination than in reality. Not because life is easy, but because the mind insists on living tomorrow's pain today. Think about how many times you have fought conversations that never happened, prepared for disasters that never arrived, lost sleep over futures that never existed. Hours, days, perhaps even years. How much of your life has been spent inside events that existed nowhere except your own imagination? This realization changes everything. Because once you recognize that thoughts are visitors, not rulers, you stop treating every fear as an order. The mind continues speaking. But for the first time, you choose whether to listen. And perhaps that is where real freedom begins. Not when the world becomes quiet, but when your mind no longer believes every thought deserves your obedience. Because wisdom is not learning how to think more. Wisdom is learning which thoughts are worth keeping. Part 4, Breaking the Loop. Understanding your mind is not enough. Because insight without action changes nothing. You can read every philosophy book ever written, memorize every quote from Marcus Aurelius, understand every psychological theory about anxiety, and still lie awake tonight, trapped inside the same endless cycle of thought. Knowledge does not free you. Practice does. This is where most people fail. They believe they must stop thinking. But that has never been the goal. The Stoics never tried to eliminate thought. They trained themselves to stop obeying every thought. There is an important difference. Imagine standing beside a busy highway. Thousands of cars rush past. You notice them. But you do not chase every car. Thoughts work the same way. Some deserve your attention. Most do not. The problem begins when every passing thought demands an emotional reaction. One fear appears. You follow it. That fear creates another. Then another. Soon, you are no longer observing your mind. You are trapped inside it. So how do you break the cycle? Not with force. Not with denial. But with awareness. The next time anxiety appears, pause. Before your mind begins writing another story, ask yourself 4 simple questions. First, is this fact? Or is this my interpretation? Separate reality from imagination. Second, is this within my control? If the answer is no, release it. Not because it is unimportant, but because your energy belongs where your influence exists. Third, what action can I take? In the next 5 minutes? Not tomorrow. Not next month. 5 minutes. Send the message. Make the phone call. Open the document. Take the walk. Drink the water. Begin. Action is the language your anxious mind understands. Movement breaks mental paralysis. Fourth. If my closest friend were facing this exact situation, what would I honestly tell them? Notice how quickly compassion appears when the problem belongs to someone else. Yet we rarely offer that same kindness to ourselves. The Stoics practiced these questions every day. Not because they expected perfection, but because the mind learns through repetition. Just as the body grows stronger through exercise, the mind grows calmer through practice. One choice at a time. One thought at a time. One day at a time. Do not expect silence overnight. Your mind has rehearsed fear for years. It will not change because of one video. But every time you interrupt the pattern, you weaken it. Every time you return to the present, you strengthen yourself. Every time you choose action over endless analysis, you reclaim another piece of your life. Freedom is rarely dramatic. It often looks ordinary. Closing the laptop. Instead of reading one more article. Making the decision. Instead of searching for perfect certainty. Going to sleep. Instead of arguing with tomorrow inside your head. Small victories, repeated consistently, become a peaceful life. Because overthinking is not defeated by one great moment of courage. It is defeated by hundreds of ordinary moments where you quietly choose reality over fear. Part 5: The life that begins after overthinking. Imagine waking up tomorrow, and for the first time in years, your first thought is not fear, not pressure, not another imaginary disaster waiting to happen. Just silence. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because your mind finally stopped fighting battles that never existed. This is what the Stoics were pointing toward. Not a perfect life, a peaceful one. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor. He carried responsibilities greater than most of us could imagine. Wars, disease, political betrayal. Death surrounded him almost every day. Yet the greatest battle he wrote about was never against Rome's enemies. It was against his own mind. Every morning, he reminded himself that difficult people would appear. Unexpected problems would come. Plans would fail. Not to become pessimistic. But so reality could never surprise him. When reality finally arrived, he was already prepared to meet it calmly. Most of us do the opposite. We expect life to be perfect, then become shocked every time it isn't. And that disappointment becomes another reason to overthink. But life was never designed to remove uncertainty. Uncertainty is the price of being alive. The question is no longer, how do I stop bad things from happening? The better question is, who will I become when they happen? That single shift changes everything. Because strength is not built when life is easy. It is revealed when life refuses to cooperate. You may still lose people. You may still fail. You may still face rejection. You may still experience grief. Stoicism never promised immunity from pain. It promised freedom from unnecessary suffering. There is a difference. Pain belongs to life. Suffering often belongs to the story we continue telling ourselves afterward. The story that says, I'll never recover. I'm too late. I'm not enough. My life is over. Those are not facts. They are interpretations. And interpretations can change. Look back at your own life. Think about the hardest moment you believed you would never survive. Now look at yourself. You're here. Still breathing. Still learning. Still moving forward. You were stronger than your fear predicted. Every single time. Maybe that is the greatest lesson overthinking can teach us. Not that we need better predictions, but that we have consistently underestimated our own ability to endure. The future does not need a perfect version of you. It needs the version of you who is willing to take the next step, despite uncertainty. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It is action. While fear is still present. And perhaps, years from now, you will not remember every anxious thought that once kept you awake. But you will remember the day you finally stopped believing that every thought deserved your attention. That day, your life quietly changed. Not because the world became safer, but because you became stronger than the voice inside your own head. So the next time your mind begins creating problems that do not yet exist, pause. Take one slow breath. Look at reality. Choose your response. Then continue walking. Because life has been waiting for you. Outside your thoughts. If this video helped you see your own mind more clearly, remember this: you don't have to win every battle inside your head. You only have to stop believing every thought it gives you. If you're walking the path toward a calmer, stronger life, subscribe to the Stoic path. And until next time, master your mind, before it masters you.